Hi, my name is Beth, and welcome to my August reading journal wrap-up. I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but August came and went so fast. It feels like just yesterday I was preparing to enjoy the last few weeks of summer, and now it's September. I start my master's program in a couple of days, so it really feels like that classic feeling of summer being over. If you watched my July reading journal wrap-up, you might remember that I said, I have very ambitious plans for August. It feels like August is my last chance to get in those high priority reads before things have a chance of being too overwhelming. Yeah. So that did not happen. There were 4 specific books that I was planning on reading in August. I only read 3 books total, and only one of them was from that original list. So August did not turn out to be the month I hoped it would be. There's one specific book on my TBR that is my ultimate high priority read, and I had really hoped that I would get to it this month, or at least have gotten a good chunk of it read in August, but I have yet to start it. I'm getting a bit worried that I won't have time to get to it, but that is a future me problem. I'm using very bright neon green scrapbook paper to decorate the background for my cover page. The quote that I'm adding to the left-hand side is, "You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you." This is a Mr. Darcy quote from Pride and Prejudice, which I read last month. I was weak in both knees when I read this. I don't remember if I pulled any quotes from the books I read this month, so I might have to do some digging from books I read earlier this year to find a quote for September, but we'll have to wait and see. With that, the cover page is complete. The first book I read in August was Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. This book came onto my radar at the end of 2023. I had not heard of it, but suddenly a bunch of people online started including this in their 2023 favorites lists. I saw Kayla from Books and Lala include it, and Elizabeth from Plant-Based Bride named it as her favorite book of last year. So the more I saw it, the more interested I was in checking it out, and it seemed like it was right up my alley. This book follows a few different characters, but each perspective centers around a character called Monstrilio. At the beginning of the book, 2 of the main characters, Magos and Joseph, experience the very tragic loss of their young son, Santiago. In her grief, Magos manages to create a new version of Santiago that they call Monstrilio, or M for short. M is part human, part monster, so in some ways, he behaves very animalistic, but in others, he exhibits normal child development. The grief associated with the memory of Santiago and the presence of M cause a lot of commotion for Magos, Joseph, and their mutual friend, Lena. This is a book that discusses grief, parenthood, and it unpacks conversations of morality in relation to both subjects. This is a strange book, but it's also a very heavy book. It deals with some really devastating subjects, but I think it handles them in a unique and well thought out way. I really enjoyed Monstrilio. I thought it was an excellent read. I do recognize that this book reflects my tastes. It's a horror novel, so it has the graphicness and the scary, but it's also a literary fiction. I think the 2 genres are blended quite nicely, and I can understand this book's appeal and why so many people were loving it last year. Like I said, this book is mostly about grief, and I found it to be really well done. This book shows different levels and expressions of grief. So Joseph, Santiago's father, demonstrates the desire for separation. If we were looking at the 5 stages of grief, I'd say he goes immediately to depression. While I respect that he needs space, he has left his wife, the only other person who knows exactly what he's going through, to grieve alone. And what happens when Magos is left to grieve alone? Well, it's a bit catastrophic, to say the least. Magos represents the person going through all 5 stages of grief. It is her denial of Santiago's death that encourages her to pursue the creation of M. And later on, she's bargaining by trying to convince everyone that M has an opportunity to live like a normal human boy as long as they can make him appear more human. I don't agree with everything Magos does, but I found her reactions to be very human. My favorite character was Joseph. While I appreciate Magos' human reactions, I found Joseph to be much more realistic about M's experience. Later in the book, Magos starts referring to M as Santiago. Joseph is the only person who sees that this is harmful, both to M and to the memory of Santiago. He seems the most invested in M's health and seems to value their relationship a lot. He definitely came to a place of acceptance much faster than Magos, which I think allows him to look at the situation with a clearer mind. I used some stickers of girls with horns from an Etsy seller called Astray. I thought it was fitting for this book. I also used some witchy outline stickers from Marianne So on Etsy. I also decided to copy the font from the book cover. I really liked it, and I thought it would pair nice with the darkness of this spread. Magos and Joseph's friend Lena is also a POV character, but I found her section to be the least important. I did like her as a character. I thought she was unique and acted as a good support person for Magos and Joseph, but I just found the actual parents to be more interesting to follow. I feel like all of the developments that happened in her section could have been addressed in either Magos or Joseph's sections. Additionally, M also becomes a POV character. I appreciated getting to understand who he was a bit better. We could see from the monster's perspective what it's like trying to live in a human world. However, I kind of wish that his POV had been done slightly differently. The events happening in this section felt very repetitive. Last year, I read The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi. Most of that book was told from perspectives of people who were not Vivek Oji. I wish that M's POV had been done similarly. I wish that there could have been more from the people who thought they know M and what he needed, and only a little bit of the truth from M himself. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. I gave Monstrilio 4.5 stars. I want to read more horror books like this because it combines a lot of the things that I love in my books. The next book I read was The Magicians by Lev Grossman. One of my reading goals this year is to reread books. My original intention was to focus my rereads on books I read early on in my reading life to see how or if my reading tastes have changed. In theory, The Magicians would fit that description because I got into reading in 2017 and I read it for the first time in 2018. However, it has just so happened to be that I have read The Magicians every other year since first reading it. So this was actually my 4th time reading this book. My reasons for rereading it have always been different, but nevertheless, I have reread the hell out of this book. The Magicians is about a 17-year-old named Quentin, whose Roman Empire is a Narnia-esque children's book series called Fillory and Further. Quentin's obsession with the Fillory books has led him to be incredibly dissatisfied with his actual life, and as a world beyond high school approaches, he becomes more and more convinced that there isn't anything worth living for. But everything changes for Quentin when he discovers that he has been accepted into a magical university called Breakbills. Suddenly, all of his dreams of living in a world of magic and wonder become a reality. However, as magic brings about new and exciting opportunities for Quentin and his friends, they also bring new challenges and things beyond their control. So when things start to go wrong, is having everything you wanted worth having at all? Like I said, I've read this book 4 times now, and until I read The Raven Cycle, I used to tell people that this was my favorite series. I thought it was a fun take on the magic school story with a focus on young adults rather than children. I liked a lot of the characters and how the story was told, so I kept coming back and kept enjoying it. Upon my 4th read, though, I've come to realize that I feel pretty differently about this book from how I have in the past. This was easily my least favorite read-through. I just feel like this time around I really saw the flaws and felt very detached. The biggest red flag in this book is Quentin himself. This was not entirely new to me. I definitely recognized some of his flaws before, but I think this time I just completely let go of giving him the benefit of the doubt. Quentin has this perpetual problem of not being able to look at or speak with any woman without making a comment on her boobs. My least favorite was probably when he referred to one of his professors as having, quote, radiant upper slopes of her achingly full and gropable breasts, end quote. And it went beyond that into women's entire looks. Quote, unpretty women were so much easier to deal with in some ways. You didn't have to face the pain of their probable unattainability, end quote. I just found this really gross, distracting, and very unnecessary. In addition to this, I found Quentin to be extremely hypocritical. He and his friend Alice have a relationship that changes a lot over the course of the book, but in the second half, he treats her so poorly, and his reason for doing so is rooted in hypocrisy. He's unable to have adult conversations because everything needs to be about him. I know he's the main character, but quite frankly, it's just really annoying. To be honest, there weren't any characters that I really connected with this time. I used to like a character called Penny. I appreciated his goth aesthetic and the commitment to his educational research, but I just found myself really confused by a lot of his decisions and the way he handled situations. Janet was entertaining, but I didn't find her very important to the story. Josh is another character who feels irrelevant unless it's for Quentin reducing him to nothing but his weight over and over again. Other than Alice, Elliot is probably the only other person who helps contribute to the story, and even still, I found myself wanting more from him. And I had completely forgotten about a character called Richard, and I feel like that says enough about his role in the book. I used a witchy sticker sheet from Marigona Suli Art to decorate this spread. Choosing witches felt very fitting for this book, and the little letter stickers I used for Lev Grossman's name were from the stationery shop Ikigai Papier. Now, there were some aspects of the book that I still enjoyed and thought were good. The first being the representation of Quentin's depression. I think this is why I used to like Quentin as a character, but in reality, I only liked this one small part of him. Quentin's depression is portrayed very realistically to me. Depression isn't something that can be instantly cured forever, and that's reflected here. Quentin starts to view life as being more exciting when he starts attending break bills, but that high eventually fades. His depression comes and goes in waves. There's a quote that I think represents Quentin's mental health struggle, and it's, quote, "I should be happy," Quentin thought. He had painstakingly assembled all the ingredients for happiness, but happiness refused to come. I like that this book understands the complexity of people and their emotions, and it's something I've appreciated in each of my reads. I also think this book demonstrates a great understanding of craft. There are so many seeds that are planted over the course of this book. There's a bunch of things that may not seem important at the time, but they all come back later. For me, this is a sign of great storytelling. Do I think that this book's version of Quidditch is entirely necessary? No. And even though I don't like Quentin, I do think he changes throughout the story. Overall, I believe the construction of this book is quite strong. Do I need to read this book again in 2 years? Probably not. I think I could do with a bit of a break. However, even though I've read this book so many times, I've only read books 2 and 3 once each. And I know that this read wasn't as good as they have been, but I am still interested in revisiting the other books. But in regard to this one, I gave The Magicians 3 stars. There's lots of things I didn't enjoy, but I can still recognize the strengths. I just don't think it's a favorite anymore. The last book I read in August was The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. Of the 4 books that I originally planned to read this month, this was the only one I actually managed to finish. This book was actually recommended to me by a viewer on my reading journal setup video. That person said that if I liked The Raven Cycle, I should check out this series as well. I'm a very simple girl. If someone says that fans of the Raven Cycle will like something, I will read whatever that something is. The Bear and the Nightingale is a Russian folktale-inspired story about a girl named Vasya. When Vasya was born, her mother Marina passed away, leaving her father to raise her and her 4 siblings alone. However, Marina's family was known for having magic in their blood, and Vasya has inherited the ability to speak to animals and communicate with creatures that only she can see. These abilities have made Vasya into a bit of an outcast, especially since her father's new wife, a deeply religious and timid girl, shuns Vasya for believing in demons and creatures. As Christianity begins to make its way into the town, Vasya's fate seems connected to the demons, specifically one that has gifted her a mysterious icy blue necklace. Vasya learns that in order to protect her family, she may have to defy the new norms around her. I was really excited to read this book, not only because it was recommended to me, but also because everyone that I've seen who's read it has nothing but praise for it. I haven't been doing very well on my series goal for this year, so I went in with the prospect that this could become a new favorite series for me. However, I maybe should have focused a bit more on the comment that recommended this book to me, because they also said that fans of Strange the Dreamer would enjoy it. I read that duology last year and I really didn't enjoy it, and I regret to inform you that I was incredibly disappointed with The Bear and the Nightingale. And I'm upset about this because I have never seen anyone not like this book. At first, I thought that my disinterest was rooted in a very specific me issue. Last year, I read a number of fairy tale retellings for a course I was taking, and I didn't really enjoy any of them. Naturally, this book was reminding me a lot of those books, but as my lack of interest continued, I realized that in addition to me just maybe not being into fairy tale retellings, I also found the book itself to be pretty boring. There are very few developments in this book, and when there were changes, I didn't feel like they had much impact on the story. Vasya's father gets remarried, but I was expecting the relationship between Vasya and her stepmother Anna to be more like a Cinderella and Lady Tremaine situation. Anna never abused her power over Vasya that much, other than to tell her that her own daughter was better than Vasya, or that Vasya was wrong for believing in demons. I never felt like she was a very threatening stepmother. And part of that could be because I didn't find Vasya to change much either. She is a curious, headstrong girl from beginning to end. When Christianity starts to become the norm and other people stop believing in the demons, Vasya continues to talk and feed the local creatures. I just thought the story progression was very slow. This book kind of felt like filler in preparation for the real story to begin, which for me doesn't really work. It also didn't help that my favorite character was one of Vasya's brothers, Sasha. Sasha is the middle child of the 5, and I loved how he treated Vasya. As someone who is the younger sister of 2 older brothers, I thought their relationship was very sweet. I also liked that Sasha had a goal for himself, and even though he understood the ramifications of it, he committed to it regardless. Sasha develops an interest in becoming a monk despite his father's discontent. However, even though he knows he will be ostracized from his family, he feels compelled to follow through with it. Unfortunately for me, it meant that around the 25% mark, Sasha left and was never seen again. A similar thing happened with Vasya's older sister, Olga. She leaves to get married and is never brought back, making me wonder what the point of their characters was. Again, I could see how they might come back in future books, but this is part of why I found this book to feel like filler. I used a Snow White fairy tale sticker sheet from Starjoy Studio for this page. For the first time, I think all of my review spreads for 1 month kind of match the energy of the books a bit. I don't go out of my way to match my spreads to the books, but if I have something that I think will match, I'll use it. I also think this is the first time this year that I really don't have too much to say about a book. I wasn't really interested in Morosco or the rivalry with his brother. I thought Konstantin's efforts were interesting, but I just found him to be so creepy. I didn't have anything wrong with the writing itself, but overall, I just wasn't really a fan. I gave The Bear and the Nightingale 2 stars. I won't be continuing this series, so I'll have to find another series to try out if I want to hit my goal for this year. But that is it for my August reading journal wrap-up. I think this month was fine. Kind of a mixed bag of stuff. I've definitely had worse reading months though. Going forward, I'll have some books that I'll be reading for school, so I will be including them in my reading journal as long as they are actual books and not just articles. For example, I'm taking a course on memoirs, so expect to see some nonfiction from me in the near future. But my goal is to try and blend my school books with the books I choose to read myself. That way there's a balance of things I'm reading and discussing. Hopefully this plan works out and offers the chance for me to discuss some new stuff. But until then, thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day.